Right. Yesterday we learned that the problems of the world are somebody's talking on their phone.
Well, they want to.
1 minute. Here we go.
Can still be present if it is as well, but the enthusiasm.
There we go. Okay. We have learned that the problems of the world are because there is no chachma revealed. What does it mean, chachma? Chachma means total surrender, awareness, and surrender to the creator of the universe, who is creating us all the time, who is ultimate reality, and ultimate meaning, and ultimate purpose, and ultimate life. But because we don't feel that, so what do we feel? We feel far away. We feel egotism. And at best, we feel that we can understand God and how far away that God is. So that's what's called bina. And we said that if all that there's felt is bina, which means understanding, and there's no chachma, which means surrender to the truth, as there can be big mistakes made. Let's take maybe an example. Let's make an example just to understand. At least that's how I understand. People that don't understand what life is, they don't understand what God is. So they don't feel what God is. They don't have a proper picture of what life is and what God is. So they have all sorts of weird ideas that come up, and philosophies and policies and political solutions and things for the world, and they're all wrong. They're all wrong, but the people are trying to come close, and it's all just different expressions of egotism. Let's take the ultimate example of this, that a person understands God. He understands there's a creator. He understands that he's being created. He understands how far away we are. And the person wants to come closer to God. That's pretty good. And so he realizes that the way to do it is Judaism or 7 Noahide commandments. And he wants to come closer to God, and he strives and he goes and he wants to come. The closer he becomes to God, the more he realizes that this world is a big lie and it's a big fake. And we have to distance ourselves from it as much as possible. Well, the first part is really true. It's a big lie and it's a big fake. But the last thing is not so. We don't have to distance ourselves from the world. Why? Because the world is what God wants, and he wants us to improve it. But in order to do that, you have to have a feeling, a clear feeling of what God is. That's what's called chachma. Chachma means a true picture that there's more to it than just myself and what I want and what I think and what I feel and what I know and my holiness and my godliness, and that those things are good. But that's only the beginning. There has to be, the end of it is to have to use this. It's like a person going to university and learning how to be a doctor because he loves people and he wants to heal people, but he never leaves. He never really actually gets out. Just learns more and becomes closer and closer. Yeah, but he doesn't want to be a doctor. You're going to have to dirty your hands up. But that's the whole purpose. The same thing. We're in the world. A person ideally can come and understand all the philosophies in the world and the religions in the world, and they're all wrong. And Judaism is right. The 7 Noahide commandments for the non-Jews, we're going to come close to the oneness of God. But still, it still becomes an ego trip. You're on the right path, but you're not going to come back. That's the problem. It's supposed to be coming and fixing up the world. So he says, therefore, you have to have chachma. What is chachma? We said that's the Torah. That's the whole novelty of the Torah, that God put his essence and his wisdom and his life into vessels, into practical vessels that we can incorporate in every aspect of the world, so that we realize the importance of the world. And even though the world is a terrible, frustrating place, we just had a little example of it with the computer over here, but nevertheless, that God wants it to be that way, so we'll fix it. And that thing of doing what God wants so that we'll fix it, that's what's called chachma. Okay, so you got to learn the Torah. You learn the Torah, you do the commandments, you draw godliness into the world, and we solved all the problems, we fixed everything up. Right? Wrong. Listen to this. All this we can learn from the Metzora. It says from the Metzora, from what's called in English it's translated leper. Okay, so we said fixing it up, that's by the Torah. Okay, but Hine, behold, if you look in the Torah, So it says something very interesting. It says that in order that this person can become pure, can become refined, the person who's the Metzora, who has this disease, which we said is the lack of this chachma, the lack of the essence of what the Torah is, the godliness of the Torah, it's missing, and that's what's going to fix it up. But beforehand, it says, Kohen, you have to take this person to the Kohen. You have to put where is the person? The person is, if he has tzorat, let's just talk about what the law is. A person that has tzorat he has to sit outside of the camp. He's ostracized. He's outside of the camp and he has to live alone. Badad yashev. He has to live outside, right? And he has to go around. Anyway, he sees anybody, he has to yell, Tame, Tame, I'm impure, I'm impure. He has to yell, keep people away. It says, but as soon as the signs go away, then he is brought to the Kohen. Kohen. He's brought to the Kohen. Shamashmo, it implies, Shiaviu et a Metzora, someone has to bring this Metzora to the place of the Kohen. Another place it says, Vayetzea Kohen, that the Kohen, he has to go outside of the camp. Which that sort of makes a little more sense because the man is sitting there alone. But nevertheless, the sentences in the Torah seemingly contradict one another. And the first one says that as soon as this person sees that the signs of the tzorat are gone, then he has to be brought to the Kohen. He's brought to the Kohen. He still is impure. There has to be brought to a Kohen. A Kohen is the priest, right? So he brought to the Kohen, and the Kohen, he says, you're pure, right? You're clean. And as soon as he says Torah, then he's pure. But before he says it, he's impure. So he has to be brought to the Kohen. Who brings him? Let's say there's other lepers that bring him. He's brought to the Kohen. But then there's a sentence that says, because the Kohen is inside of the camp, he can't. But on the other hand, it says the Kohen goes out. It says it says that the Kohen has to go outside of the camp. The Kohen goes outside. So is he brought to the Kohen, or does the Kohen go out? So there's some people that say, well, he's brought up to the border, and then the Kohen, he goes up to the border, and he says, maybe that's one way of looking at it. But the Rebbe has a different answer, a more spiritual answer. Gami and Zos, it also says, so before the person can bring this chachma into the world, you have to bring him to the Kohen, or he brings himself to the Kohen. Two contradictory sentences. We're going to see what this means to us. Kam also, inyan zotia Torah Metzora, the word tiyah, this will be the law of the Metzora. This is an extra word. What does it mean? This will be. This is Zot Torah Metzora. This is the law of the Metzora when you want to refine him. That's the continuation of the sentence. What does it mean? This will be. It's muteret. That word, he will be, is extra. Like it says, the Al-Sheikh. The Al-Sheikh is one of the commentaries on the Torah, and he points this out. It's also. Says the Rebbe, I'm going to explain this. This is very deep. Inyan is explained like this. The Metzora, the sick person, he is brought to the Kohen, or the Kohen comes to him. What's going on? And what does it mean that this will be? We can understand it says in the Zohar, the Mashkat, that what it says, the Daf Mem Tet in the Zohar. Zohar is a Kabbalistic book written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai about 1,800 years ago. It says over there on page 49, side 2 of the page, Amud Beis, what does it mean? He is brought to the Kohen. It says, V'ho'ala mi boy. It should say that he is elevated to the Kohen. Ubir Dvorov. Let's explain what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said. We can explain it from what the Arizal said. Rabbi Yitzchak Luria said about 1,400 years afterwards, about 400 years ago. He said, and the Ramaz brings it also, Rav Moshe Zechut, and he explains the Zohar. It says, Ki aliyah de harato el Kohen, by means of showing him to the Kohen, tachton, the lower Kohen, we'll explain what this is. Gorim lamayla, this causes above, sha'oto oro, that these lights that we're talking about, shemitzad ema, which come from, we said, bina, which is in Zeranpin, which we said that was the problem when bina was alone. We said the understanding is alone, that's problems. It says it causes that these lights, hayotzim, which come outside, which that's what makes the tzorat, sha'azim nase bechutz, bechinas nagoim, then externally on the outside of the skin, they become blemishes. But by bringing him to the Kohen, goram lamayla, this causes sha'otama oros, that these lights, these high revelations of God, instead of being spread out and going to a bad place, that's the tzor, yachzur, will come back to their place. Bebechinas mati velo mati, in a way which is called, now this is Kabbalah, right? This is what's called mati velo mati. Mati velo mati means touching and not touching. Yatsu lechutz, I'll explain this. Yatsu lechutz, and that they came out, the chuzer v'nichnas, and it goes back in, umidabek b'makoro, and it is clinging to its place. Ali they can, by means of this, lo koach elachitzoni, there won't be in the power for the external bad forces to grab onto them. Ad kan lashon. That's what the Arizal says. Okay, and the Rebbe is going to explain, but let me just say this in a short way. You want to draw down this light of Chachma, this Torah. You learn the Torah, it's going to fix everything up. Well, it's not. You have to make a preparation for this. It's not so simple. We have the problem. The problem is too much understanding. That's what he says is the problem. The problem is too much understanding. You finally get your understanding to realize how great God is, how wonderful God is, how God is creating everything, and you just want God, and you don't want anything to do with the world. Bad. As soon as that's what you want, then there's going to be, bad results. That's called yenika lechitzonim, nurture to egotism. Egotism, because what you really feel inside is yourself, but you just feel, I am far away from God. I want to come close to God. I am, the big capital I becomes so big that there's a big place for mistakes. How do you fix up the mistakes? Torah. You learn the Torah, and that fixes up everything, right? Not so quickly. We see there's a lot of people that learn the Torah, and it doesn't fix up anything. Sometimes people learn the Torah and it makes them worse. Sometimes people learn the Torah and become monsters, right? You can't tell them anything because they know the Torah. They can find excuses for everything that they do. Everything. It says in the Torah, right? You can do it. They didn't know all the sentences, they know all the things. Because there's something missing over here. They got the Torah. What's missing? Yep, the person has to be brought to the Kohen. What does it mean, brought to the Kohen? He says this is the level of mati velo mati, touching and not touching. Touching and not touching means like this. You realize, you check yourself. That's what it means. Mati means you're moving and you come back. From below, it's called rotze b'sho. When it's godliness, it's called mati velo mati, means that it's in the world and out of the world. In the world and out, touching the world and not touching the world. But what does it mean? It means like this, that when a person feels how great God is, how wonderful God is, so he wants to come closer. But then, on the other hand, he starts to realize that, listen, maybe this is not what God wants. Maybe I'm making a mistake. So then he comes back. That's called touching and not touching. It goes out and he comes back. He's checking himself. He's not thinking that because now I am religious and I have the Torah, I can do anything that I want to. There was a person called Yerovam ben Nevat. I mean, he was the classic example that he knew the whole Torah. It says that when he would learn Torah, there would be fire around him. He was so holy and spiritual, and he brought all the Jewish people to worship the golden calf for 100, 250 years. That was in the first temple, Yerovam ben Nevat. Because all he wanted to do was just come closer and closer and closer and closer, and he didn't really care about how he did it. Just the main thing, he should feel good. So let's explain this in the service of God. In other words, you can misuse the Torah. The Torah does not fix you up automatically. The Torah fixes totally. If you learn the Torah, it fixes you up automatically 5%, 10%, 20%. You learn Chassidut, another 10%. But this other 70%, you have to fix yourself up. And it's enough, even 1%, if you have to fix yourself up, to mess the whole thing up, right? Mess the whole thing up. You buy the best Ferrari, whatever do they have, the Bugatti. There's one that costs like $150 million, something like that, right? And one spark plug doesn't work. A little spark plug, just the timing is a little bit off, right? It can wreck the whole car. The same thing, a person is devoted to God, and he learns the Torah, he does the commandments, but he's got that little egotism there, and it can wreck the whole thing up. Wreck up the whole thing. Let's explain this in service of God. Even though Shesibas Tzoras, that the cause of this Tzorat and the Negaim, and this, we said this what is this spiritual disease that's caused, it comes because the mochin of Abba, because Chachma is not there. We said Chachma is not there because you don't really feel surrender to God. This is the bittul, surrendering to God, the shuv, coming back into the world, that because of this, there's a yenika de chitzoni. Because of this, a person can be an egotist. That's what we said that Metzora is. Because you just want to go closer. You want to go closer and closer to God, and from that can come bad things, be lavut, and you get excited. Mochin the aim that we said because of your understanding. So it says, a person might think, shetikun mavot, that how do you fix yourself up is al yedei avoda b'hamshachas mochin the aim. All you have to do is just sit and learn the Torah and draw godliness down, namely learning Torah. Shu hamshachas mochin the Abba. This is what it says is drawing down the chachma of God, the infinite aspect of God, that now I know that I am not the boss. God is the boss, and you got everything fixed up. You got the letters of the Torah that makes vessels, etc., like we said. But, says the Rebbe, it's not so simple. True, if you learn the Torah, that fixes up the world, but you have to have the proper attitude. Bringing down what's called this aspect of God's life force, Abba, Chachma, into Zeranpin, into our emotions, Kemikodim, in order to fix it up, Yatukan Adavar, it will be fixed, we fix it up, Ki Or Abba, because we said, like we said before, the light of Chachma pushes away all of the bad things, all the negative, egotistical things that come from, this is but really, you can't really, you can learn the Torah, and you can know the whole Torah, but so you don't make the mistake like Yerovam ben Nevat made, and he threw all Judaism, at least the 10 tribes, into idolatry with his knowledge of Torah, with his tremendous the devotion to God. It says because the problem is that he was missing something. There was one step missing. In order that you can fix up Takan Amavos, if you want to fix up the world by means of the Torah, the Ema, which in the blemish, which was in Ema, which was in Bina, you have to do something first, tshuva. First of all, you have to do tshuva. Ki tshuva ba'oto makom, you have to return in that place. Then you can draw down mochin da Abba. What's it mean? What does it mean? You have to decide to yourself that maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. It could be that I'm not right. So you sit and learn the Torah and you have all the answers. You can knock everybody down. You have all of the answers, everything knocked down, but you still did knock yourself down. You still have that little ego inside of yourself that says, now I'm right. Now I'm the boss. Now I have found it. Now I am there. I. And with this I and all of your wisdom and everything like that, there's a little bit of a place of, right? I want to do this. I want to feel good. As soon as there's this I, so you feel a little depressed, and in order to get rid of the depression, you're willing to do anything. You have a little bit of a lust. In order to get rid of this lust, you're willing to do anything. You have anger. Somebody gets in your way. In order to get rid of this anger, you're willing to do anything. You're not interested in what God wants. In fact, you convince yourself that God wants what you want. You have all the Torah, you have all the commandments, you're doing everything. So says the Rebbe, there's one ingredient that's missing. Before, what did you have? You have understanding of the greatness of God, and that made you, how do you say, leave the world. Now you realize the way to fix it up is by means of the Torah. The Torah will bring you back into the world. But you have one little, how do you say, loose nut over there, right? One little spark plug that doesn't work. And you didn't fix that up. That's what's called doing tshuva. Doing tshuva means that a person says to himself, listen, maybe I'm not right 100%. Maybe I have to check myself out. Maybe I have to check what it says in the Torah all the time. It says you have to you have to arouse a level of running to God, and first of all, you have to get excited about God. Afterwards, and then you join it to this level of the bittel, of the surrender to Abba, to Chachma. This is what we said before. Mate velo mate. If your heart runs to God, shuv lechad, you come back. That's what's called tshuva. Tshuva means that even before you learn the Torah, that you have to check yourself out. You have to check yourself out. Is what I'm doing fixing up the world? Is what I'm doing really benefiting? Or is it really what God wants? There's a saying, my teacher, of blessed memory, one of them was Rabbi Alva Pliskin. They asked him, what is a chassid? He said, a chassid is a person that doesn't fool himself. Doesn't fool himself. Easiest thing to do, that
Rabbi, we can't hear you or see you. Abba, could you see the rabbi?
No.
I wonder if he knows about it. I'm gonna call him. I'm gonna call.
We can't hear you or see you.
We can't hear you. Oh, I see. 1 second. Can you hear us, Rabbi? Rabbi Bolton, can you hear us? We can't hear you.
Showing computer audio. Do you hear
Oh,
me?
now we hear you.
Oh,
Now we can hear you.
okay, good, good, good.
What changed? You unplugged something?
I don't know what I did. Okay, let's go. We're just the classes has been plagued by problems. Okay, there we go. Good. All right, now let's go. So you have to have, what do we say? There has to be, first of all, you have to check yourself out. You hear me? Yes, everyone hears me? Good. Well, it says, therefore, that's tshuva. That's what's called tshuva. So that's what it means. You have to bring, the person has to go to the Kohen, and the Kohen has to come to him. What does it mean? He has to go to the Kohen. It says, first of all, you have to go to the Kohen in order for the Torah that you learn to work to fix up the world. So first of all, you have to go to the Kohen. What does it mean going to the Kohen? You have to fix yourself up. First of all, tashuv hey. That's what's called tshuva. Tashuv hey. The letter of God's name correspond to the aspects of our soul. So the letters of God's name are Yud, and then Hey, and then Vav, and then Hey. Hey, Yud is Chachma, Hey is Bina. So it says, doing tshuva means putting your Bina, your understanding, in the right place. Hey Eloah, the upper Hey, this is Bina. When a person does against what God wants, Pagam Ba, you make a blemish in it, Shenifrada Mina Hey, and it becomes separate from the Yud, which we said that's the whole idea of the Tzorat. That's what we said before. Shua Bittel, which is surrendering to God of Chachmei Eloah, of the upper wisdom of God. So it means, simply speaking, simple English, egotism. Jewish egotism, religious egotism, holy egotism, but still egotism. By means of this, that a person checking himself out and thinking, maybe I'm not doing what God wants, maybe I'm not thinking what God wants, maybe I'm not saying what God wants, maybe. Just checking yourself out, being open to break your egotism a little bit. It's called breaking your heart. By means of this, nimshach is drawn down. If you don't check yourself out, then there's a place where there can be a nurture to external forces of ema, which is, we've said before, that's false egotism. That's the thing of negoim. But al yedei, by means of she'ora b'tshuva, by means of a person arousing himself in tshuva, ma'umka deliba, from the depths of his heart, and he thinks to himself, listen, maybe what I want is not 100% right? Maybe this is not what God wants. Mimamakim, like it says, from the depths I call out to God. Beit amukim. If, like we said before, you're Ravam ben Navat, if he could make such a terrible mistake, for sure everybody else can make a terrible mistake. He knew the whole Torah. He was chosen. He was chosen by God to be the leader of the 10 tribes after King Solomon died. He was chosen. A prophet came to him, Achia Shiloni, and chose him to be the leader. He was such a great man. And his egotism just drove him crazy. It said he couldn't bear the thought that maybe people would go back to the other 2 tribes, because that's where the Holy Temple was. So he made golden calves and said, everybody can worship the golden calves. And he convinced everyone. He was that charismatic a person. It says a bittel, says, that's what it means. Mimama came from the depths I call out to you. The 2 depths of Ava, Ima, Chachma and Bina together. Hainu b'chinas Rotza v'shov. Rotza means going up to God. That's Bina. And Shuv means coming back to the world to fix it up, doing what God wants. That's Chachma. Shuv b'chinas Ava Rabba. This is a tremendous love. A bittel, working not on your brain, but on your heart. Bittel, surrounding, the bittel, surrendering yourself to Shalom Maila, which is above any sort of personal feelings that you have. By means of this, it becomes tashuv hey. You bring the hey. Your understanding goes back to the yud, which is bittul, surrender to God. Avo, but kodem is darosa ava. But before you arouse this will of God, this will for yourself to do what God wants, it's impossible. You can't draw down this mochin da abba. Okay, so what's the Rebbe say? First of all, you have to realize that your egotism is causing you problems. That your understanding is not being checked. So then a person says to himself, okay, I'm out of order, I'm out of line. Let me fix it. Is this what God wants? Thinks to himself, this is really what God wants. That's what's called doing tshuva. That's what's called doing tshuva. After he does tshuva, and he thinks to himself, this is what God wants. Okay, now let's learn the Torah. But he's learning the Torah because that's what God wants. And he wants to use it because that's what God wants and the way that God wants. Then he can fix up the world. Then if he has the proper attitude, that's what it says somewhere else, etc., 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 and etc., etc. But that's what it says in Eitz Chaim, that this lights, they will come back to their place. That's what's mati velo mati. Mati velo mati means going and coming back, not just running, that's the same thing as Rotzi V'Shov, going and coming back. Okay, so now that's the difference between bringing the person to the Kohen, and afterwards the Kohen comes out. That's what it says, you bring the person to the Kohen, the person that has this, understands that his egotism and that his lust for God is becoming a problem. So he has to be brought to the Kohen. Namely, this is what's called arousing your will, your will, that you want, you realize the problem and that you want God to be revealed here in the world. You realize that you've got an overdose of aim of understanding. And that you want to be included also in Chachma, in the oneness of God. Like it says, Shuv Hashem Lagabi Yud. Like it says, bringing the Hey to the Yud. Like we said before, Tshuva. That's what we say, Shema Yisrael. Shem is the gematria Ban and Rapach. That's what it means, V'yach Yuchzar, that he will go back, returning to its place. So first of all, you have to yourself say to yourself, am I really doing what God wants? That one way to do that is you go to rabbis, ask them, go to people you respect, you go to the Kohen, you take advice, open up Igros Kodesh, right? People used to write letters to the Rebbe. There's books filled with letters to the Rebbe, the people asking the Rebbe exactly this question: am I on the right path? Am I doing the right thing? What should I do in this situation? You want to, even without, there was people who were geniuses in Torah, and they asked the Rebbe these questions. But then afterwards, after you check yourself, then afterwards, Yitzhak Kohen, then the Kohen comes out. Namely, then God reacts. Hamshachas Hashuv, there's drawn down a revelation of God into vessels in the letters of this world, that you can learn Torah and you can be also a nice, pleasant person. You can be practical. You don't lose your temper. You don't get depressed. And when you do, you immediately fix yourself up. And if you don't have this chachma, then if you lose your temper or become depressed, what do? You make excuses. Whatever I feel, and you have the whole Torah. You have a whole treasure house of excuses that you can use, because you don't have this chachma, this desire to be surrendered to God. So what's the Rebbe saying? If you have too much egotism, that's the problem of the world. The solution is Torah. But in order for the Torah to be effective, it has to have the proper vessels. And those vessels are desire to empty yourself out from your own selfishness, to check yourself constantly. That's what it means. You have to go to the Kohen, you have to go to rabbis, go to friends, ask them for advice. Then afterwards, it can be drawn down. Then that means to go to the Kohen. Then afterwards is that the Kohen comes to you, drawing down this level of shuv, of returning to God into vessels. That's what's called Yesod Abba, breaks through Yesod Ema. We talked about that before, and is drawn down, and that's what makes a productive, fertile life. That Yesod Abba, which that's the aspect of God, the procreative aspect of God, that's the Brit, the connection between God and us, the eternal connection between God and us, that's between God's Chachma and our Bina, God's ability to push us into the world properly, but also our understanding that gives us the enthusiasm to actually do it. Okay, a little bit complicated, a lot of technical difficulties we had, but that's basically what we learned in a nutshell. The problems of the world, even in the highest sense, are too much understanding, not enough surrender to the truth. The truth is the Torah. Bringing the Torah into the world, that's the truth. That'll fix up the world. But in order to do that, you have to have the proper attitude. And the proper attitude is go to the Kohen. Constantly be checking yourself, going to your rabbis, to your teachers, and ask them if this is really what the Torah says. Is this really what I'm supposed to do? And then after that, there can be the Kohen comes to you. Then there's an arousal from above, and things become fixed up. You do what you're supposed to, and that begins to fix up this confusion of the world. Put the puzzle together. Good. Thank you for bearing with me. And now we're going to learn the Sikha of the Rebbe. 1 minute.